Today we're looking at a comedy slice of life called Servants X Service. Spoilers ahead. Lucy Yamagami, Yutaka Hasebe, and Saya Miyoshi are introduced to the ward office as new civil servants and are placed under the care of their upperclassman Taishi Ichimiya, who is rather unreliable. Yutaka is very relaxed to the point of slacking off every chance he gets, while Saya is very nervous because this is her first job. Lucy is introduced to Megami Chihaya, who is a very low-key and emotionless person. After the first few hours or so, the three newbies meet up again and share their disappointments. Saya was caught up in a long story with Mrs. Tanaka, unable to escape. Lucy was scolded by a customer for taking too long in directing her to the right window. Yutaka was disheartened to discover that he couldn't slack off as frequently as he would have liked. Later, however, Lucy is shown making great progress, much to Saya's admiration. Afterwards, Yutaka, Taishi, and Saya found out that she's a modern-day Jugamu, a great source of embarrassment for her. Due to her parents not being able to decide on one first name, Lucy reveals that the real reason she joined the civil service was to get revenge on the civil servant who carelessly allowed her birth certificate to pass without raising a single question about her name. After rescuing Lucy twice from some customers, her opinion of him changes, until he begins to make fun of her name again. Taishi and Saya later comment that although Lucy holds a grudge against the civil service, she's actually suited for the job. Lucy sees Saya hiding under her desk, and discovers that she was trying to stay out of Mrs. Tanaka's sight to avoid listening to more stories. But consequently, as Yutaka points out, she can't do her work. Saya is ashamed because she's unable to work, so Lucy goes to Megami for advice, who tells her that she will think on it. Megami asks Lucy to cover for her the next day, and it is revealed that she is going to attend a cosplay event. Megami tells Lucy that she became a temporary worker so that she would be able to continue to cosplay while working. She later became obsessed with trying to get Lucy to cosplay as Black Rose, a companion of Megami's character, Gerbera Pink, and Lucy reluctantly agrees to think about it. Later, Toko, a high school girl, comes to visit the office and gives Yutaka, Saya, and Lucy a test to see if they can do their new jobs properly. Yutaka demonstrates his surprisingly amazing memory by reciting a nurse insurance law, receiving Toko's email address as a reward. Saya's nervousness causes Toko to become angry, and Mrs. Tanaka comes to the rescue by scolding her harshly. Toko is relieved to see that Lucy is normal, until she asks Lucy her name, to which Lucy recites her entire name. Toko, fed up with the newbies, complains to Taishi, who tells her she's bothering everyone around her. She begins crying, so he hugs her and gives her money to placate her before sending her home. Saya then discovers that Toko's full name is Toko Ichimiya, thus making her Taishi's little sister. Taishi shares the story of how Toko came to love the ward office, but it is clear that what Toko adores is her brother, not the office. Afterwards, Megami sees that Saya has a hard time saying what's on her mind, so she enlists Toko's help in getting Saya to talk openly. Saya tells Toko that if she continues to abuse her brother, he will never understand her true feelings, causing Toko to cry again. Taishi tells her not to come back because she keeps bothering others, but Saya saves her by asking her to come back to help her learn more, though this causes Saya to lose even more time to working. Megami rebukes Taishi for questioning her on whether he is a reliable senpai before giving her an assessment of Lucy. Feeling incompetent, Taishi reverts back to his old habits with Lucy, but Toko sees him patting Lucy's head. After giving Lucy a hard time, Toko delivers Taishi's bento she especially made for him as an excuse to have lunch with him. In the records room, Lucy breaks her bra, forcing her to wear the office uniform. As she interacts with Saya, Megami, Taishi, and Yutaka, they all come to notice that something is wrong with her bra. At lunch, the four contemplate on how to address Lucy's predicament with her. However, Yutaka takes the initiative, and realizing his intentions, the others agree, forcing her to go home. The next day, Yutaka talks with Taishi about not being able to get Lucy's email address as he attempts to do so. Seeing her leave though, he follows her and invites her out to lunch while at the bookstore, where she reveals that she usually doesn't have money before payday as she buys too many books. Even after dinner, he forgets to ask for her email address. In the supply room, Yutaka and Taishi hear out Lucy's insecurities about her abilities and her name. Later, as she's having trouble with a child, Yutaka arrives to entertain the girl, as Lucy realizes he's able to use ventriloquism. Yutaka meets Lucy a few times while it's raining, and discovers that she's afraid of lightning and thunder. He helps Lucy, but has some fun as he tells Megami that Lucy was busy for so long due to filling out the name section on documents. Lucy oversees Yutaka using sign language and ends up questioning him about himself. As they're talking, Lucy agrees to learn sign language, but not before she repays the previous favor, which ends up being settled by her telling Yutaka her cup size. A shocked Yutaka starts counting to verify her size, as Lucy yells at him to stop before running off. In the end, Yutaka forgets yet again to ask Lucy for her email address. Megami and Yutaka are now rivals concerning Lucy. Yutaka asks out Lucy twice, but gets rejected. They go out for a drink with the section manager of their section, and Lucy and Yutaka end up in a hotel. Lucy thanks Yutaka and his sister for taking care of her. It is revealed that Taishi has a girlfriend, which is Megami. They meet at Taishi's, but get surprised when Toko comes home. They handle the situation. The section manager tries to get closer with his servants. Saya thinks about quitting her job. Mrs. Tanaka wants Saya to marry her grandson. Megami visits Toko at home. The section manager thinks that Taishi and Megami do not get along well together because of her cold reactions towards him, and puts them together in the storeroom. Mrs. Tanaka's grandson visits Saya at work. It seems that Tanaka feels attracted to Yutaka. Lucy and Yutaka go out for dinner again. Tanaka drags Lucy to go out for dinner with him and talks about the relationship between them and Yutaka, but gets interrupted by the latter. The next day, Lucy wants to thank Yutaka by going on a date with him in 2 months. Lucy laments over her date predicament, while a mentally lapsing Megami contemplates her situation, realizing the fact that she hasn't gone out on a date in a long time. Megami reminisces about herself from 2 years ago when she dressed plainly, and about how Taishi got involved with her. Annoyed by Taishi, Megami heads back to work, where she dictates to Lucy that they will go shopping for her skirt. At the store, Lucy and Megami meet Saya and Toko, but the latter two leave due to Lucy being self-conscious about her clothing and her ability to wear almost all kinds. Lucy takes on a new attitude after Megami tells her that looking down on herself is rude to others around her. At work the next day, the two run into Yutaka, where Lucy says she wanted to accompany him until the end, naively implying marriage. While Saya and Lucy are talking, Kaoru appears and takes the two out to eat, where she reminisces to the two about Joji. At work, Yutaka believes that Lucy is getting married, leaving him in a distraught mood. In the break room, Lucy tells him about her Tosho card, while congratulating him about Kaoru's engagement, as he gets a text from his sister saying that she is the one getting married. Embarrassed at his misunderstanding, he slams his phone to the floor, telling Lucy that he'll get a new one as he was going to erase all the girls' emails he had anyway. Not understanding, Yutaka tells Lucy it means he doesn't need any other girls other than her. Lucy is seen in blushingly high spirits after that, while Yutaka is secluded at his desk. With Taishi not home, Megami plans on telling Toko she's going out with her brother. Exhausted from studying so much and eating the cake that Megami brought, Toko misinterprets what Megami is saying and eventually falls asleep. Relaxing too much, Megami falls asleep with Toko's head in her lap. After arriving home, Taishi annoys Megami once again. At work, Megami discusses Toko's studying with Saya, but Saya reveals that she knows Megami and Taishi are going out, telling her not to worry too much. After work, Joji meets Saya on her way out, as he is trying to challenge Yutaka. As Megami ponders about the Ichimiya siblings, Lucy echoes Saya's earlier comments toward Megami. Outside of the building, due to Saya's comments about his actions, Joji is led to tears, causing a scene for Saya. The next day, Saya has a hangover from regrets. Kanon visits the welfare office to meet with Toko, but kills some time wandering around, where she meets Yutaka several times. Attempting to play off his slacking as actual work, he's caught by Taishi. Kanon meets Lucy, who recommends the shop on the first floor, but on her way there, passes by Megami, who asks for her measurements. Heading to Saya, Kenzo accidentally runs across her and Toko talking, where he passes himself off as a simple stuffed animal. As she is leaving, Toko remembers where she left her phone at Saya's desk, but when she goes to pick it up, she sees everyone talking to Kenzo. She's left with the belief that they're all doing it because she's been too hard on them. As she's about to apologize to her brother and Yutaka, she sees Lucy with Kenzo on her head and Saya walking, chatting with each other, discovering the bunny is actually the section manager. She runs off embarrassed by her actions. The next day, Kanon drops off her dad, believing each of his subordinates to be weird, but with all of them agreeing that he is the weirdest of them all. Yutaka is still trying to avoid Lucy after that confession an episode ago. Lucy tries to talk to him and looks for him, but everybody says he's just slacking around somewhere. Kenzo finds her later and accompanies her to go look for him. In the process, Kenzo was accidentally sold as a stuffed toy at the outdoor bazaar outside the city hall. He is recovered just in time when the girl who bought him immediately grabbed the substitute stuffed bunny because it was cuter, much to his chagrin. Later, as Yutaka tries to hide by eating his lunch at the rooftop, he finds Lucy there, eating bread crusts for lunch, hoping that she would find him there. As he gives her the sandwich he has, Lucy explains her actions back then, her not being used to men being around her. Meanwhile, Saya, while trying to psych herself up before her date with Joji, decides to go into town on her day off, where she weirdly comes across everyone in the office. Lucy, Megami, Yutaka, Taishi, even Kanon, Kenzo, and Mrs. Tanaka herself. Yutaka hears of Joji's date with Saya when Saya consulted with Megami and Lucy, so he warns him not to do weird things to her. During the date, they can only seem to talk about Yutaka, so when Saya tried to change the subject, she becomes amused when she finds out he can't talk of anything, familiar at least, other than his rival. And before he could talk about certain regrets, Saya fainted after taking a sip of red wine. She later finds herself being carried by Joji quite a distance from the restaurant. He said he had fun during the date, and asks her for another one for later, to which she agrees. The next day, amidst a hangover, she tells Yutaka that Joji is fine if he's not involved. Megami took 3 days off to finish all of her costume projects, including the dress Lucy will be wearing during her date with Yutaka. Megami warned Taishi not to text her, call her, or come to her apartment, but he goes to her apartment on the 3rd day to check her out anyway, and as a result, he weaseled out of that shopping trip he promised Toko, much to her disdain. He finds the door to her apartment unlocked, and, as he entered, sees her on the floor, flat, but all of her work completed. He later helped clean her apartment, make food, and become her pillow for the rest of the night. The next day, before her date, Megami instructs Lucy to watch Yutaka and find out what kind of person he really is, to see if he's really a decent guy or not. Lucy was shocked to find out that the dress she'll be wearing was too short, but Megami insists it's okay. But she's so embarrassed with the dress that she even thinks of postponing it. In fact, on the day of her date with Yutaka, Lucy did arrive around 20 minutes late. During the date, Lucy did observe that he paid attention to her, even being protective of her. She even got freaked out by Yutaka's in-date behavior that she ran like mad and tripped. As Yutaka tended to the scratch on her knee, he confronted Lucy about her problem, that is her long, ridiculous name. He also asked her as to how she thinks of him. Lucy, nervous, is unable to give an answer, until Yutaka got a call from his sister about Kaoru's marriage meeting, and he was requested to come, ending the date early. But Lucy says they can do it again some other time. Megami is lurking in the shadows, ready to intervene if something goes wrong, while trying to tell Toko, who is beside her, about her relationship with her brother. There she finds out that Toko doesn't mind if her brother has a girlfriend. The next day, Yutaka does his work without slacking off, though with some mistakes. Taishi, Saya, and Megami notice this and find it worrisome. They ask him about it, and find out the reason was not what they expected. Yutaka discovered that the one who approved Lucy's name was his own father. As Taishi, Saya, and Megami found out the reason of Yutaka's weird behavior, they also knew another reason why Yutaka avoided Lucy. It was because at the day Lucy's name was brought to the ward office, Yutaka was down in a high fever until he was taken into the hospital. His father became so worried about him and thus couldn't concentrate on his work, which is why he accidentally approved Lucy's name without even thinking about it any further. Depressed by the truth that he was the indirect reason why Lucy had a long name, Yutaka was afraid that Lucy would hate him since she was so concerned about her name. The three tried to cheer him up, but in the end, only made it worse. When Lucy came into the room, they quickly changed the subject, and Lucy saw Yutaka's dejected and sad face towards her. Because of this, she became so concerned that maybe she had done something bad to Yutaka. One day when Lucy was about to go home, Taishi went to Yutaka to try and cheer him up, by saying it'll only be harder to say the truth the longer he holds it in. Cheered up by Taishi's words, Yutaka chased after Lucy and finally told her the truth. However, Lucy didn't think that Yutaka was at fault, since anyone could catch a fever. Because of Yutaka's insistence, Lucy assumed that if everything was Yutaka's fault, he had to take responsibility. She asked him to keep calling her by her first name because she began to like him calling her Lucy all the time. Just when Yutaka was about to confess to her, Joji, Kanon, Toko, and Kenzo suddenly came in, ruining the mood. The three who were listening the whole time shoved all of them away, and the mood became awkward once again. When the two of them were outside, Yutaka once again tried to ask out Lucy. Lucy did reject him, but gave him hope by saying not yet. The others quickly caught up to the two and started to ruin the mood again. The next day, Taishi tried to tell Toko about his relationship with Megami, only to fail since he was nervous. Yutaka became a lot more energetic and enthusiastic in his work. Saya reprimanded Joji for ruining Lucy and Yutaka's moments. As the two's mood got better, all of them were back to their jobs. After the ending credits, Yutaka finally got Lucy's email address, and Megami told them to explode. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to let us know by leaving a like. Subscribe for more stories and check out other stories here.